Hey, this is Warren Redlick. I'm so happy. I've got Tom Nash. We're going to have a great conversation. We're going to talk about my battery revenue model of how to think about Tesla going out to 2030. And then we're going to talk about the Tesla community and certain aspects of the community and how there's seems to be growing conflict within the community. We might talk about Barry Glack, or as Tom will probably call him, Gary Black, Ross Gerber, maybe Earl of Frunkpuppy, and others. And we'll dive into that shortly. Are you ready? Let's go. Okay, so Tom, I have this model. I look at Tesla today. 2022, Tesla used about 100 gigawatt hours of batteries and generated about $80 billion in revenue, which works out to about $800 a kilowatt hour. If you look at a Model 3 Standard Range Plus, it's about $47,000 for about a 60 kilowatt hour battery pack, which works out to about $800 a kilowatt hour. If you look at different Tesla products, you see something in the ballpark of $800 a kilowatt hour for a lot of their products, some more, some less. Megapack is only around $500 a kilowatt hour. So my model, I basically take that and project it out to 2030. And I say, well, Tesla says they're going to do 3 terawatt hours of products in 2030. I'm leaving out Robotaxi. I'm leaving out Tesla Bot, like the outsized revenue that could be generated from Robotaxi or from Tesla Bot or AI training as a service, and just going with this concept. If
So
Tesla produces
just auto and energy, basically.
It's primarily auto and energy. It's whatever. They may come up with other products that have batteries in them, as long as they're getting in the ballpark of $800 a kilowatt hour, the model holds.
Okay, fair enough.
So, and in my mind, it's 2 terawatt hours for energy and 1 terawatt hour for cars. I did see something where it seems like Tesla's projecting 1.5 terawatt hours for energy and 1.5 terawatt hours for cars, but it works either way.
Yep.
I mean, on the energy side, Megapack is significantly less than $800 a kilowatt hour, but Powerwall is usually sold with solar, and Powerwall plus solar is more than $1,000 a kilowatt hour if you work out the numbers. So, on the energy side, it might end up being less than $800 a kilowatt hour overall. On the vehicle side, it might end up being more, or it might be close, but this is just ballpark numbers. So if you get out to 2030, and Tesla does achieve 3 terawatt hours of batteries going into products that are sold to customers, and they're able to maintain $800 a kilowatt hour, that's $2.4 trillion in revenue, which is 30x revenue for 2022. In other words, they would 30x the number of batteries, and when they would 30x the amount of revenue. And you can modify that. You can say, well, they're not going to get $800 a kilowatt hour. They're not going to achieve 3 terawatt hours, and you can bring it down a little bit. But at worst, if you follow this model, you're probably at like a 20 or 15x in 8 years. You see where I'm going with this? And I can also paint the upside and say, well, suppose they do solve Robotaxi. Suppose they do get Bot working. And Bot, by the way, just as an example of the extreme of this story, Tesla Bot is going to have a 2.3 kilowatt hour pack. I don't think it's crazy to say Tesla Bot would sell for $50,000. That's over $20,000 a kilowatt hour, and I'm talking about $800 a kilowatt hour. And if you sold 100 million bots at $50,000 a piece, you can see where that goes pretty crazy. So and Robotaxi generates crazy revenue and profits if you follow that. But just going with this battery revenue model, 3 terawatt hours in 2030, $2.4 trillion in revenue. It's about a 30x. What do you think of that model? Am I oversimplifying? Am I missing something? Are my assumptions wrong? Where do you go with that?
There's an interesting model, to be honest. I like the fact that you focus on only tangibles. So a lot of these valuations that I'm looking at, a lot of this modeling is very abstract. I mean, we don't know anything about the AI side of things. We don't know anything about the robotics. We really don't know enough about the robotaxi. It's not there yet, obviously. So that's one thing, by the way, you have common with Gary Black, because that's how he is modeling his own predictions. He's just going off of energy and auto, which is exactly what you're doing. And I am also in that camp. I do not want to model anything that's not within that realm. Clearly, right now, the auto is the bigger, more flashy industry. It's more sexy. It's in the news. It's a terrific car. Well, multiple cars, right? But I remember years ago, which is what you're alluding to, is Elon is saying, look, the energy business is going to be as big, if not bigger than the auto industry. We're not a car company. That's We're an energy company and the technological energy company, and I think that's where you headed with this. And looking at the industrial side, this is where I think the proof is in the pudding. You already see the way Tesla has become kind of a staple in the industrial energy management side. Everybody uses the mega packs. I mean, it's a staple of industry. Um, Looking at the way I know that there's only so much bandwidth the company has, right? But obviously they haven't went full throttle on the I would call residential energy solutions. We've seen what it can do. I don't know if you recall when we had all the power outages and the storms and whatnot, and obviously people that had the Tesla products were fine, and the proof of concept has already happened. So it works, it does its job, it's incredibly efficient, and just strictly off of it's just going to save you money whether you before the apocalyptic stuff. It's a money saver. So I know it works. I know that the engineering team is strong, and I know they haven't even pushed that topic at all yet because they're so focused on ramping up the auto industry, and they just have just so many bodies and brains to put on this. Uh, I look at this Powerwall Mega Pack. The only thing that's missing to get to your point is just bandwidth, just the company putting more resources to push this out, create they just don't have enough of it. I don't know if you talked about this on your channel, but I remember back in the day they literally had to stop selling power walls because there was I think they just said you can only get it if you buy the solar.
That's still true. They're planning to open up Powerwall once they produce it in volume to let people buy it without solar. But currently, I believe you have to order.
You have to buy. Yeah, that's literally showing me that there's just too much demand for what they can produce. At the end of the day, look, we can talk. A lot of the criticism of Tesla can be. We can talk about the criticism, but forget the car, forget everything else. The Powerwall is a no-brainer. Tell me anybody who has a home that would say no, I don't want this product, right? It's a money saving product. So where's the downside, right? There's no. It's an environmentally friendly money saving device that's also going to keep you warm if the grid goes out or whatever. So the product is terrific. It works. It's proven. I don't know about the numbers because my concern is not so much as demand. We've seen Apple use mega packs. We've seen the people want it, companies want it. The question is, can they produce as much at scale and at the same quality? And I don't know. It just depends on how much growth Tesla generates. But I would agree with you on the little caveat that your assumption is that they can actually create this much of product within the next 7 years, which is it's a huge challenge.
It's a big jump.
So I don't think there's a demand problem. I think it's a supply question whether they can make it. It's like a field of dreams. If they build it, they will come.
Right. Well, CATL has announced plans to scale up manufacturing of lithium iron phosphate battery cells to more than a terawatt hour by like 2026, I think it was.
Yep.
And LG Chem is trying to keep up with CATL. So, there's this question about whether the raw materials are there. I think
Peter Zehan did the whole video saying we're going to run out of raw materials. Did you see that video?
I did. I was planning a response. I think
you should do a response on it.
I think James Stevenson did a response already. I may do. I was actually thinking about doing a response. There's several talking heads out there. John Stossel's another one who have advanced these theories about what's wrong with electric vehicles, and there's a essentially infinite supply of these minerals in the Earth's crust. It's just a matter of getting them out and refining them. And I'm confident that if CATL has said this is what we're going to do, they're probably going to do it. If LG Chem says this is what they're going to do, they're probably going to do it. Drew Baglino recently said that by 2030, Tesla would be producing 1,000 gigawatt hours of battery cells in the United States alone.
I'll tell you what. If I hope Peter Zehan, I hope that's the problem. If the problem is getting the raw materials and resources to build enough electric vehicles, and I hope that's the problem, because if that's the problem, that means that everything else is firing on all cylinders.
Yeah, and it's a problem. It is a problem. It's a genuine problem, but it's a solvable problem. Yeah. The materials are there. It's just getting the resources out. There was Drew Baglino was on a panel or was being interviewed by Stanford. So I want to say it's 3 or 4 months ago. And I made a video about this. And he talked about how the supply chain for batteries in particular, but electric vehicles in general, is sort of like it's an offshoot of industries that existed before. It's like byproducts of other industries. Like graphite is just a byproduct of the fossil fuel industry. And what he was saying is we need to scale up production and make the supply chain designed for batteries, designed for electric vehicles, instead of relying on some byproduct of some other existing industry, because EVs are going to get too big to rely on that current supply chain. So that's why Tesla's building a lithium refinery in
But there's also like
Texas.
things that have to happen on the infrastructure side. I mean, think about it this way: if everybody's is on an electric vehicle in a residential building with high risers, it's a completely different grid that's required to support that. So there's changes that needs to happen in the world to create that infrastructure for mass adoption of electric vehicles. But it's definitely solvable.
Yeah.
I think copper is going to be more expensive over the next 10 years for sure. Like if you believe in EV adoption, you definitely want to invest in copper.
Yeah,
Because
copper, lithium. I own
yeah.
I have a small investment in an ETF called LIT, which was a Ross Gerber recommendation, by the way. We'll talk about Ross later. I bought that on Ross's recommendation, and that's, raw materials that go into EVs and batteries. Seems like a pretty good investment if you want to
Yep.
if you don't want to trust just Tesla and you want to invest in other angles. Like I think BYD is probably a good investment. I think BYD will probably
Let's talk
succeed.
about it. So BYD is one of the biggest conundrums in the history of my investing career, which is not that long, but I've never seen anything like this. Because BYD is, in any sort of capacity you can examine it fundamentally, is probably Tesla's biggest threat.
Right.
They have the know-how, the cheap labor, the manpower, the experience, the raw materials, the supply chain. They sell everywhere in the globe. They're completely multinational. They have complete vertical integration. They make their own batteries. Like it's a legit. It's not like one of them clowns like Neo or Xpeng or this BS garbage googly goo nonsense. They can scale, and they're bad and they're mean, and they're catching up. That's why Warren Buffett had such a huge holding in BYD, because it's a damn good company and they're probably Tesla's biggest threat. The problem is that people haven't noticed, but Warren Buffett actually reduced his holding over the past 6 months. Since in July, Warren Buffett owned over 20% of BYD, which is insane. He now owns under 14%.
Yeah, he still owns a
So
lot, but he owns less.
he owns a lot, but he's consistently selling over the past 6 months.
Yeah.
Every month he's selling little by little, and I think, and I speculate here, is that the reason is because he wants to reduce exposure to China. At this point, exposure to China is just irresponsible. BYD is its Achilles heel is the fact that it's located in this geography where you are completely subject to the whims of bureaucrats, crazy regulators, inconsistent legislation, inconsistent enforcement of rules, total authoritarian government that may cancel you, steal your IP, put you in prison. Like they just, I don't know if you heard this, but they basically had Jack Ma relinquish. He was convinced. Great arguments I think they gave to him to relinquish his control in Ant Group from from I think 53% to 6. So they
Yeah.
basically took like like they took like 90% of his holding, and I'm just saying, like, that's the problem with BYD. They're located in this geography, and you would think, well, why would the Chinese government do anything to destroy its own, its own holy grail? They've done it before.
Right.
And was supposed to be the biggest IPO with in at least in modern history, with a valuation of $350 billion, and they just killed it just because Jack Ma said something, just because they got too big, whatever the reason may be. So
Yeah.
with BYD, I would agree with you, but the only problem is that they're in China, and at this point, people are starting to wake up to the fact that China is not a healthy environment for any business to be in. So
Now, I'm not convinced that other countries are that much better. Like I don't feel like Europe is that great. I'm not there. I think parts of the United States are great, but parts of the United States aren't. And I worry that in the future, depending on how elections go and depending on how our political situation goes, our situation could get worse as well. I think the nice thing about China, it seems to me, is as long as you don't offend the people, the leaders in Beijing, you're usually okay.
Well, I'll give you
Usually.
an example where nobody offended anybody. So you may say, well, Jack Ma, he
Yeah.
criticized them. That's why. Okay, so another example, which was the Chinese version of Uber, company called Didi Global, that went public in the US through a very common structure that's called the VIE, the variable interest entity, which is a way of non-Chinese residents to own Chinese stock through a Cayman Islands kind of holding structure. Uh, it's the identical structure to what's been used for a couple decades by Chinese companies. DD Global does it, and then the Chinese government says, "Well, you shouldn't have done that. We've never approved that structure," and they just canceled DD Global. I don't know if the companies basically they
Mm.
canceled their ability, and the reason is because they use the VIE, which is exactly what the other companies use, and there was no like political issues. They just decided just because. So I would say that like as as a business decision, not as a moral judgment. I'm not here to say, well,
Right.
that's as a business decision. Like if I'm managing money, I can't price that in. This completely arbitrary whim of a bureaucrat to cause
Yeah.
have
I took a class in college called political risk analysis, and that was basically the issue is how do you
yeah
value, and it's really hard to value that kind of risk.
yeah.
Yeah. So, but taking that, I mean, one other concern I had about BYD was I feel like with Chinese companies, their accounting is not as clear as American companies, and they're more prone to misrepresenting their assets or their income flows. Not that American companies are perfect. We had examples in the United States of
Enron
fraudulent behavior.
Enron was an accounting fraud, by the way,
Yeah.
and it happened in the U.S. and it was audited by you remember and I remember because we're old enough, but it was audited by Arthur Anderson, who was they used to be
Yes.
called the Big
Yes.
Five. The reason they called the Big Four because the top one of the Big Five was Arthur Anderson, and they literally helped Enron to scam everybody, which is kind of insane. So it's not a Chinese invention. Let's be honest here. Yeah.
I actually interviewed with Anderson Consulting when I was coming out of college,
Well,
and
they were the top dog in the industry. Like the
yeah.
reason they got Enron because they were the biggest one. Like, nobody came close.
Yeah.
But that was a pure accounting fraud. So that it's not like I don't like this nationalistic stuff saying, well, that's the Chinese have everybody cheats. I think the regulation, the enforcement, and the punitive system in the US is much better post Enron, post WorldCom, post .com crash, post 2008 crash than it is in China right now. So we have the Sarbanes-Oxley, we have all these checks and balances. Like there's a lot of crap that happened in the US that have caused the regulators to be much more aware of this nonsense. And the monkey business, the SEC is definitely better post Madoff for sure. Like in China, nothing has really imploded yet. It's about
Right.
to. It's about to, and it will. The real estate market will implode. Their refusal to get audited by the PSAOB will implode because that can't last forever. I mean, you can't say we're audited by Big Four based on US GAAP and not let the PSAOB take a look at your books. So all of this will come to a massive stinker of an implosion, but it hasn't happened yet. And that's why I agree with you. I think it's beyond what you're saying. I think in China, I don't trust anything that's in their financials. Nothing.
So, with that said, does that suggest that Tesla is a great risk because they have so much at stake in China?
I don't. I'm not. I'm in the minority here. I don't. I'm not like a huge. Oh, Tesla is dependent on China guy. Like the whole. Like I think. Yes, he has a factory there. Yes, it's a big market, but Tesla is not dependent on China. It has exposure, and I wish it wouldn't have. I think in hindsight, does it build that factory? Probably still does because it's access to the Middle East, it's access to logistical supply chains, it's cheap labor, it's access to China. So he still does it because you have to be in China if you want to sell a car, right? But that exposure is not where Tesla's bread and butter is. I mean, people tend to think, well, China is the big. Yes, it's a huge market, but trust me, there's still massive untapped market cap. There's massive TAM in Europe and the US to be exploited by Tesla, which is nothing to do with China. So,
How do you
uh,
see Tesla exploiting that TAM in the US and Europe? What does Tesla do in the I mean, I think we're going to see this Generation 3 platform come about, and I
what do
actually
you mean
think it's going to
Generation
be
3 platform?
That's what they said they're going to talk about on March 1. That what has also been called the robo-taxi platform vehicle. Some people call it Model 2. They said it was going to be about half the cost to produce of the Model 3, Model Y. So I'm projecting it's actually going to be an under $20,000 vehicle. Because if you can sell Model 3 for $33,000 in China, you should be able to sell this for $18,000 at a profit.
Look, again, I don't know about China, but like looking at the US market. So in the US, there's two cars that you have to be dominant. You have to have a pickup truck in your lineup, which is the best category in the US to be in. And it's currently owned by the F-150, but it's slowly losing ground. There's new competitors in the market. And I don't know if you ever had an experience with the Rivian, but them good cars. I mean, there's so much utility in that car. As a 4x4, is a camping vehicle. Like, it's just a terrific.
I have a friend here in Melbourne, Florida, who has one, and he showed
amazing cars. Amazing. I'm rooting for Rivian, although I think they have a lot of issues, but I hope they make it. Unlike Lucid, which is a complete.
We agree on that.
Disappointment. No. I'm gonna say disappointment. I don't want to get sued. I would call personal disappointment. But here's so I'm getting sidetracked here. So in the US, if you want to make it like in the auto industry in the US, you have to have a pickup truck, which Tesla is lagging. There's no two ways about it. They're late to the party. They're not gonna be first or second, and that's a problem. The other thing you need to have is like, I call it the Toyota Corolla equivalent. The average car in the US, like the 4-seater, 5-seater sedans, like a $25,000 car. It's like a Corolla. It's a basic, like a Mazda 3, whatever that may be, right? They don't have that yet. So think about it. You can look at it as a bad indicator or as a good indicator. And I choose to look at it as a good indicator. I'll tell you why. So imagine like we're playing a basketball game, and I know you're a fan of basketball, and me too as well. So imagine like nothing goes in, you're basically making every possible mistake, all the ball, like everything going against you, you're playing horribly, and you're only down by like 7 points at the half. So then you say, well, if I'm playing this bad and I'm only down 7 points, imagine what happens when we start playing proper, right? The flip side of it, we may be, well, dude, if you're having a bad day, you're not going to be able to flip a switch and go like jam around in the second half. So who knows? So I'll look at it like this. I say Tesla is currently kicking ass with no truck, with no Toyota Corolla equivalent, just as a premium brand with literally like two types of cars, 3Y, S, and X. Imagine what happens when Tesla breaks out into this sedan category. Imagine what happens when the Cybertruck comes out. That's a whole new ballgame for Tesla. So I look at it as like Tesla is already owned like 2/3 of the North American EV market as it stands, and EV adoption is on the rise. We just saw numbers from the UK. Every third car it's an EV in the UK, not to mention Norway and all this. So it will happen in the US. So I'm very optimistic. So when Tesla has that offering, that pickup truck and that $25,000 car, you better watch out. I mean, that's going to be a bloodbath. That's when I think it will become more of a. Right now it's theoretical. People hear like Stephen Mark Ryan and like Farzad and yourself talking about bankruptcy potential to Big Auto, but this is like right now they kind of like saying whatever. Like, dude, when Tesla has like a proper lineup, because they'll only have 2 cars right now. Imagine they have a proper lineup, it's game over for them. It's game over for them. They can't compete. They just can't. Look at how much. Look, GM is fumbling the EV. Like they have gazillion orders for the Silverado. Where the hell is it? Where's the car?
Well, all the car companies have the challenge, including Tesla, of producing in volume. It's like when you said that Tesla's late to the pickup truck market. Yes and no. I mean, they're late in the sense that Rivian and F-150 Lightning got there first, but neither one of them can produce in volume.
Yeah.
And Tesla's plan with Cybertruck is to make it in high volume. So yes, they'll be late, and the Cybertruck might be later this year. I think we'll see the first Cybertrucks delivered in the, let's say, Q3 of this year, but by early 2024 they'll be making them in much higher volume than Ford or Rivian. And Ford, I think Ford can't scale. Rivian is losing money on every vehicle. That you like the Rivian R1T, but it's such a complex vehicle that the cost of manufacture is really high. I do think they're going to survive. I think Rivian, unlike Lucid,
they have a lot of problems. Elon warned them about this. He told them production is hard.
But they have a lot of cash. Rivian has a
That-
lot of
yeah,
cash.
yeah. They have a lot of cash. They have good partnerships. They have a good network. They just terminated two people today. Like I
Oh
don't know
yeah,
if you heard this.
no,
Their head of global supply chain left, and the VP of body work, whatever. Like they lost two key employees today. I don't know if they got fired or just quit, whatever. But like going to full on ramp up is very challenging. It
yeah, yeah,
almost bankrupt Elon like 57 times
yeah,
going through that meat grinder. So hopefully they make it out alive.
yeah. So just going back to this battery revenue model, you see where I'm going. Like we have a
Yep.
stock trading at $120 a share. If it 20x's, we're talking about $2,400 a share. I don't think that's. I think people think that's crazy. And this is without Robotaxi network. This is without bot. This is without AI training as a service. This is without whatever other things Elon has up his sleeve. That's a. I think I'm being reasonable at saying it could go to that level, which means a market cap of. I think that's 8 trillion.
Possibly. Look, we're talking. It's like the big question is with Tesla's future is more on the ability of Elon Musk to execute and maintain dominance. So here's like the big criticism from people who are like traditional investors for what you just said right now, because they can't grasp an $8 trillion market cap. They've never
Right.
seen it, and because they've never seen it, they assume it's impossible. And I can understand where they're coming from. Uh, but here's the problem: if you already are, as it stands, I think the best company in the world, and that's how I define Tesla. And people hate me for saying that, certain people, but it's fine. I think they're the best company in the world right now, and they haven't even gotten started yet. They haven't even scratched the surface. So I don't think that's impossible. I just think that the problem with a lot of our audience is that they assume that that possibility is also implied probability. We don't know the like with every company, with every execution, there's a million different pitfalls that can happen from now until 2030. So uh, what you're saying will probably be true if everything goes according to plan. But you know what they say about plans? We plan and God laughs.
Yes.
There's there's only one Elon.
I said that to
Yeah.
a woman once. It didn't go over well.
Yeah. So all I'm saying, there's a lot of executional risks from today to the point that you're imagining, but it's definitely possible. Whether this is probable or not, I don't know, but I'm betting on at least I don't know if I'll most Tesla investors, long-term investors, do not need your scenario to come true to make a lot of money.
Right.
Like most Tesla investors would be happy with 1/4 of what you just said right now.
Oh yeah, a 3x or a 5x is great
Yeah,
for most people.
because the index will give you what 8% a year.
Yeah.
So in 10 years, what you're gonna do? 150% on the index, 140%. I don't know. The S&P 500 did like what 170% of the past 10 years.
Yeah.
And that was some really crazy 10 years. We had an incredible run. So that's like the best you're ever going to get out of the index. So I think Tesla is very high potential, but I have a problem where people assume that that's a probability, and then they look at the guy like Dave Lee, when Dave Lee went into margin and he went all in on Tesla and worked out, and then they do it and they use their kids' college money and rent money and food money, and then the stock goes down for a year or two, and then they absolutely lose their shit, and that I don't want to see. That really scares me, because that's I'm very careful with like Tesla predictions, because people take it a little bit out of context. We got to be careful with that.
Well, I feel like as I have been over the top or perceived as over the top, I think I'm being completely level on where I think Tesla's going. And this model that I'm talking about is the conservative model. Because if you get into my robo-taxi model or my bot model, you get numbers that are even crazier than that. I think that the interesting thing comes up, which, like you mentioned, margin. I've never recommended people use margin. I've never recommended people buy options. I've actually had at least one person on my channel who was advocating options, and I was persistently critical. Like, this is a very risky strategy, and I think a lot of people get burned when they play those. They underestimate small probability events. They
Yeah.
don't see black swan events coming that take them
Yeah.
down. And that
I
like we
don't do
just
options
had.
at all. Like I don't do options at all.
Yeah.
There is a way to be a long-term investor with options.
Yeah.
For example, like you can go very long on the low price on the stock you really want to own, and then you either own it at a cheap price or you get a premium for not buying it because the price never. So, but that's like very specific, like insulated cases of where options can be served as a long-term investment vehicle. Most people don't do that. They do what you just defined right now, which is gambling. And
Yeah. I have bought, what did I recently? I recently bought 5 options, out a year and a half at a $350 strike price. And, it was like $9,000. And I'm already down to like $2,000 or something like that. But I don't care. It was just, that's like a small play for me. That was just sort of like a little fun thing. But, the vast majority of my assets are just Tesla stock, and I don't have any margin. And I think, my point is that someone like me talks about Tesla and has this very rosy picture of the future 8 years from now. And I don't tend to make short-term predictions like this is where Tesla will be. Like, Yaman Tasdevar, value analyst, is like Tesla will triple in 2022. And he's still saying that, which is bizarre. But people buy into that.
He'll need a DeLorean for that to happen.
Right. But he's been pushing that. And I think when you combine that with people who advocate margin and people who advocate option strategies, I think that's like, I wasn't even really aware of options. I mean, I knew that options existed. I never really paid attention to how they worked. I wasn't really aware about margins and margin trading or borrowing on margin. So I never did it. And
the problem with margin is I think where I there's two things I think, and I've been very adamant about it on my channel. There's two things retail investors should never do. They should never short stocks, because the downside is there's no floor to how much money you can lose on the short.
Yeah.
And like if you're Melvin Capital, then it's cool. So you're gonna get bailed out by Ken Griffin. Worst thing that happens, you lose your job. That's pretty much it. But as an individual, you can lose your house. The other thing I don't recommend that retail investors ever do is just trade on margins, because it's like going and saying, well, I can't afford it, so I'm just going to take a loan to pay for it. It's okay if you need to eat and that's food or shelter. It's not okay if it's speculative investments, which is all investments are by nature speculative.
Sure.
And I think that if you can't afford it, just don't do it. Plus, the problem with margin, you don't control the investment.
Right.
If you're in margin, you don't get to call any of the shots, because if things go south, you get margin called and you all of a sudden have to liquidate. You can't be a long-term investor on the margin. That's the problem.
Right.
Because they can margin call you anytime and then you're pretty much out.
Yeah. No, and I feel like people who make these decisions, there's a I think they won a Nobel Prize for this. It's called prospect theory. It's Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky. And it's that humans are really bad at understanding very small probabilities and very large probabilities. So if the probability of something is near zero, we tend to either undervalue it or overvalue it. So like people are scared of flying on airplanes, even though the risk of dying on an airplane crash is so infinitesimally small. But at the same time, people buy lottery tickets when the probability of winning the lottery is incredibly small. I'm not saying I've never bought a lottery ticket, by the way. I may have bought one once in a while. But the probability of winning is so small, and people think, well, I have the dream, right? And then the same thing on the high end. If something is extremely high probability, people tend to overestimate the probability of it happening, or we just make bad decisions. And so people who do options trading and people who trade on margin, the problem is that they imagine that something that the risks are low probability events, and they're not good at evaluating this. So anybody who's interested in that, go on Wikipedia and look up prospect theory. It's a pretty interesting
I think they
read.
won the Nobel Prize for that, if I'm not
Yes,
mistaken.
They did. Yeah.
I know that theory. By the way, here's the funny story for you. About a year ago, I had a birthday, and my wife wanted to teach our kids a lesson about how gambling on lottery tickets is a bad idea. So she bought all these scratchy cards for the lottery. All the scratch offs. So she wanted them to really get disappointed, and they won every single card.
No way.
Everything was a winner. It's like,
oops.
I told her, what have you done? So she made me go and buy another pack, and then every single one was a loser, as it usually happens.
Right.
And then they learned the lesson. So basically, that was pretty funny. I've never won so much money. I think the key is to try to lose. That's the only time you can win.
Right. That's the secret. Okay, I got it. If you try to lose, you'll win. Yeah. So all right. So So then I want to follow up on this margin option trading thing. There's this ongoing question. This is going to lead us to what I wanted to talk about was these, what I would call false prophets in the Tesla community. But the stock fell. The stock reached a peak of, I don't know, $407 a share. It's now down around $120 a share, something like that. I don't even watch it. It's funny thing is I don't watch it on a daily basis. I don't even know what the stock is trading at today.
I'm checking as we speak because I haven't seen all day. I'll tell you.
I only see when my friends on Twitter start tweeting about it. If it doesn't go up or down much, then nobody tweets about it, and I don't see what the price is.
122. It's up 3% today.
Yeah. Okay. So the stock is at, let's say
122. I don't check on a daily basis either. I don't know. I just checked right now for the first time today.
Right. So I have this theory. Well, Elon advanced the theory that the stock started falling because of macro. That the Fed raising interest rates makes it harder for people to afford to buy cars because the cost of the car loan goes up, the monthly payment goes up, so people can afford less car. And my take on it is that the macro pushed down the stock initially, and then some people got margin called or some people panicked. And as the stock fell, more and more people got margin called, and there was all this selling pressure on the stock. And then you got to the end of the year, and there's I don't understand options well enough to say this. Somebody told me some of the option strategies lead to something similar to margin calls, and they get pressured to sell, or market makers get pressured to sell. And then towards the end of the year, you had tax loss harvesting. And so there was more selling, so people could, it's like a tax strategy. You sell the stock that you lost at to offset the gains you had in some other stock. So there were all these pressures that pushed the stock down. There's an alternate theory, which is from what I would call the false prophets, the Ross Gerbers, the Barry Glacks. I call him Barry Glack. You can call him Gary Black if you want.
I like Gary.
I know, we're going to talk about that. But they advocate this other theory that it's Elon's fault, that Elon buying Twitter and the Twitter overhang caused the stock to fall, that the way Elon sold his stock by not doing it through an investment bank and doing it on the open market, that caused the stock to fall. There's all these arguments that Elon is the reason that the stock fell. And, I'm not saying, I think it's very clear that if a large investor sells a big chunk of stock in a short time, that's going to have a short-term impact on the stock price, but it shouldn't have a long-term impact on the stock price. So what's your take on what caused the stock to fall from over 400 to where it is now around 120? I mean, does what I said make sense? Do you think it's a lot of everything together? What are your thoughts?
Okay, so I have a theory about what happened. So the stock is down 47.5% over the past 6 months. So lost half its market cap in 6 months. So some people are saying, well, this is the Twitter shenanigans. And when I say Twitter shenanigans, is the acquisition of Twitter, is the sale of stocks to fund the Twitter acquisition, is the sale of stocks to fund further Twitter survival, and all the activist tweeting with all this political stuff, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So there's that explanation. And some people rely on that as the sole explanation of what just happened. There's the Elon Musk explanation, which is basically, well, the Fed did this. I don't know if you remember that Terry Gilliam movie, Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, where he says, "Look what God did to us," and then Johnny Depp says, "It wasn't God, it was you, you stupid F." So there's you remember that scene in the convertible when they're driving through Barstow? A great movie, by the way. Benicio del Toro killed that in that movie also. Anyways, so there's the Elon Musk explanation, which basically God did to us, essentially like the Fed is doing this. And there's the investment community explanation, which is, look, this is a very high retail participation stock, traditionally about 60% retail. And this what happens with retail investors. They're flaky. They're like a Wiener Schnitzel. They flick and deflake, and with the slightest change in trend, they just bolt like little mice, right? And that's just what happens. That's why you need high institutional investing participation to keep a stock stable. And in that category, I'll include all the things you said about margin calls, options, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's also another theory that says that the tax loss harvesting exacerbated the problem, which it may have. So essentially, by the end of the year, as you mentioned, people can accumulate capital loss and either use it this year or carry it forward to future years. especially if they're anticipating the market to start moving up a little bit. And the problem with that kind of strategy, that whoever is sold for tax loss harvesting at the end of the year, let's say December 28th, they
Yeah,
won't
they
be
would have
able
bought
to.
back in January.
They cannot buy back yet. No,
Oh,
no,
right,
they
they
cannot.
can't. Right, right,
They cannot for 30 days because
right,
of the war sale rule. So we won't see them pouring back in until the end of this month. So
right,
they're still out. So whoever harvested the loss on Tesla, they're still sitting on the sidelines praying that the stock is not going to fly up. And they
right,
already lost 10%. They're already kind of eating their head right now because over
right,
the past 5 days, they're already down 11% because the stock went up by 11% over the past week. So they're already kind of regretting the decision. So, and that's in general, I think, I would say, like, that's the problem with tax loss harvesting. That 30-day cool period, you never know what's going to happen. You never know. You
yeah,
might get, your penis will be slammed in the mousetrap, and there's nothing you can do about it. So 11% is hurt. It hurts.
yeah,
My explanation is, like, I have 3 kids, and they sometimes they each come to me randomly explaining to me how the other two have abused them, and like, oh, he took that, and then I combine all of them, and I understand that the truth is some sort of a, a combination of all these 3 stories into one kind of reality where all each story makes sense in itself, but somehow it all happened where all 3 stories kind of, there's a truth in the middle. I
right,
think here as well, the truth is in the middle. The truth is that Elon's actions have not helped, if in fact they were detrimental. And talking about politics, you remember Michael Jordan once said, "Republicans buy sneakers too." I
yeah,
mean, you shouldn't bifurcate your fandom on politics. I mean, it's a bad idea. Uh, we get to do it because we're YouTubers. Who cares, right? We're just a guy on the freaking YouTube. Who cares? But like, you're the head of the one of the largest companies in the world. Probably would be a good idea to drink a tall glass of shut the fuck up sometimes, and that didn't help. I think I was a little bit infantile, but look, I can't blame Elon because that's Elon. I mean, you can't get the good Elon without the bad Elon. It's like saying, well, the good Elon wouldn't have, like, the corporate guy who behaves wouldn't have put in all the PayPal money into a rocket company and Tesla. He would have bought real estate and retired, right? So that's Elon, for better or worse, and
right.
you can't be mad at him for being Elon. That's him. I like when he's acting out like that because it makes me feel a little bit more human. Because well, if he can do it, then I'm definitely not an idiot for singing Bob Seger songs on YouTube. Uh, but so that's one thing. The other thing is Tesla will keep suffering this fate until institutional investors will have faith in it. And that's a conversation I had with Gary Black, who I like a lot, as mentioned. And we both agree that we need more institutional participation in the stock, to about 60-65%, for the stock to stabilize. Because with retail investors, there's just too much instability. There's a lot of speculation going on, a lot of gambling, a lot of short-term interest. So it's a problem. So to date, Tesla have kind of broken the mold. And for the past 2 years, it has become the only stock in history I can remember with such high retail participation that have not fluctuated. They stay stable, but everything has a price. And when things got really bad and it started losing ground, you saw half of the people bolted to the doors.
Yeah,
And so that was definitely a contributing factor. And I think the Fed raising interest, that's like, if you have to take that 50% and say, 20% is the Fed, 20% is Elon Musk's actions in Twitter, and 10% is the retail investors bolting for the door. Because at the end of the day, look, that's, I don't know if that's the exact percentage, but that's kind of a combination of all three. So for Tesla to go back up,
yeah,
it's just a matter of time, and I'll tell you why. Obviously, I think Elon has definitely learned his lesson. I see less and less of him tweeting recently. I don't know if you noticed, but I don't see him like going all out, like political, like he did like a month and a half ago, 2 months ago. Uh, you disagree?
I think he just tweeted today something.
What did he say today? Maybe he said something today. I haven't heard him talk in anything politics for a while. What did he
No,
say
I,
today?
I think he just tweeted. Well, he tweeted something about some things your party tells you are false and some other things the other party tells you are true, which
Well,
is
that's not a
sort
political
of,
tweet.
that was a little better. But no, there was one.
Well, he
E-
hates Biden. He hates
Yeah,
Biden,
yeah.
but
Ian
everybody.
Miles Chong said, "When did late night comedy shows become nothing but lame Democrat-leaning political commentary?" And Elon said, "Good question." And Elon said, "Good question." So Elon endorsed that tweet, which was critical of the Democratic Party and
Yeah.
the Democratic left. So here's the thing about the politics stuff. I hear that criticism all the time. Nobody complained when Elon endorsed Andrew Yang. When Elon
That's
said that
true.
Andrew
Yeah.
Yang is good, no, the only reason, see, the Republicans didn't care when Elon endorsed Andrew Yang.
Yeah, but here's
The
the problem.
Democrats lost their shit when
I'll
Elon
tell you
said
why.
something about Ron DeSantis.
Well, look, I'll give you an example. You remember when Allen Iverson came into the NBA?
Love Allen Iverson, sure.
One of my favorite players, probably the best short guy to ever play the game.
Yeah, yeah.
And maybe it's between him and Isaiah Thomas. So anyway, and I'd pick him probably. When he was at his best, taking the 76ers to the finals on his own against Shaq, I don't like.
Yeah, yeah.
He got away with everything. Practice, that practice stuff, like
Yeah, yeah.
nothing.
We're
He wouldn't
talking about practice.
practice. Like
Yeah.
the minute his game started deteriorating, that's the minute all these stuff started becoming a problem all of a sudden. In Denver, remember in Denver, all of a sudden, like
Yeah.
so look, everybody said, well, Elon, you just be Elon, no problem, as long as the stock was great, the money was cheap, and the Fed was accommodating, and everything was great. So it didn't matter. But now when it went from easy mode to expert mode, people like saying, well, look, we have to be like really careful right now because the market is really shit. We can't afford to kind of alienate half the audience. And I think he's not getting away with this now because of how bad things are, and people
Right.
expect him to kind of preserve. Like they're saying, well, dude, you have a fiduciary duty. I own stock in your company, so don't sabotage your own company, sort of say.
Right.
I think that long term, this is all irrelevant, and I'll tell you why.
Right.
So Fed will eventually have to pivot at some point, whether it happens 2024, 2025, I don't know. At some point, inflation will go down, rates will go down as well. At some point, institutional investors will be forced to buy into Tesla because the business is just too good and they only know one color, which is green. And at some point, people will get used to Elon being Elon. The one thing that will, I think, carry the stock upwards is fundamentals on a very basic level. So as it stands right now, Tesla with about 1/10 of the sales of Toyota, which is the king of the neighborhood. They with about what 11 million cars sold a year, give or take. So Tesla is selling 1/10 of that, and they have doubled the gross margin than Toyota with 1/10 of the cars. So when you ramp up, margins go up. Just general knowledge, you ramp up, margins get better.
Economies of scale.
Yep. So if I'm already making twice as margin as you, Toyota, and I'm 1/10 of your capacity, imagine what happens to Tesla when they actually scale up, and imagine what EV adoption actually going to the levels of 1 in every 2 cars in EV, or 2 in every 3 cars is in EV. So at this point, Tesla's margins, the pristineness of their balance sheet with no debt and massive cash, their supercharger network, which second to none. I mean, there's nobody even comes close to that infrastructure. That software advantage that they have. At some point, none of this other stuff, which are noise, won't matter. Everything we're talking about right now is very impactful on short-term pricing of the stock. And then the company keeps printing money and getting better. None of this is important. Who cares?
Right.
People like investors will look at PE and say, "Oh shit, the stock is trading at what 15 PE, 12 PE. Oh my god!" And
Yeah, there's a moment. There's a moment when the buying pressure comes.
Yep.
And my theory is the margin selling pressure has cleared. The scared little rabbits have cleared. And once the like, I think it's probably going to be. We'll see what the Q4 numbers are. If the Q4 numbers are good, as particularly the cash flow and the profit are good, then I think you might see institutional investors and other big investors start buying in, saying, "Hey, this PE ratio is too low. This company's growing too fast." And then
I'm buying now. I'm dying now, Warren. I'm just saying it was a horrible year for the auto industry in the US.
right. Well,
Everybody had the shit year except Tesla.
I'm waiting to sell my house. As soon as my house sells, I'm buy. I don't have any free cash right now. I'm waiting for my house to sell, and then I'm going to buy a bunch more. But yeah, I have never sold a share, by the way. I've never sold a share.
I didn't know that. That I'm not surprised. Yeah.
I started buying in
Uh,
2016. There was one moment where I sold in one account and bought an equal number in another account because I had to play a certain game, but I never legitimately, never really sold a share in that sense because I deliberately offset and bought in this other account. So let's talk about Ross, Gary, Earl. What I see in the Tesla community is in the early days, we were focused on the cool cars, the mission of accelerating the transition to sustainable energy, the technology. And as the stock started to really take off, you got a lot of people who came into the community who were more focused on the stock than they were on the company. And I think now there's a lot of voices like Gary Black, like Ross Gerber now, I don't think he was like this before, who are talking a lot more about the stock than they are about the company and the technology. So like James Dauma talks about technology. Dave Lee mostly talks about the technology.
I've never heard Dave Lee mention anything but the technology about Tesla.
Right, right. Oh, he's aware of the stock, right? But he doesn't focus on it. So when you have these voices that are focused on the stock instead of the company, I think it doesn't distract the company from the mission. The company's on their mission. They're fine. But there's this community of people who follow Tesla, some who are investors, some who are just fans, some who are big investors. Like I'm almost all in. I'm about 90, not counting cash, I'm like 95 or 98% Tesla. I added some cash to my portfolio that I haven't bought stock with yet because I've got expenses I got to deal with till I sell my house.
Yep.
But there's all these people who then they started playing on margin, then they started doing options trading, and then all of a sudden the stock goes down and they all freaked out. And I feel like Gary Black and Ross Gerber are giving an answer to people who are wondering, why did my stock fall? I'm not saying it's the correct answer, but they're giving an answer and they're creating this following that is now anti-Elon. Like when you say Elon did this wrong, Elon did that wrong, Elon shouldn't talk about politics, Elon shouldn't sell his stock this way, Elon shouldn't be messing with Twitter, he should be in the factory getting the Cybertruck out or whatever. To me, those are all attacks on Elon. And I think that's contrary to what the community was about originally. So you seem to think Gary's okay. What am I getting wrong about? And I have a specific criticism about Gary I'll get to in a minute, but what do you think I'm getting wrong about Gary?
I don't know what you're getting wrong about Gary, but I'll tell you how I can coexist with people I completely disagree with and be fine with it. That's a lost art, and especially in America in 2022.
I'm not known for that skill.
Yeah, so I'm completely fine with. I have many of my Twitter followers who like hate on every tweet. I'm fine with that as long as somebody is not disrespectful and not being an asshole.
Yeah,
I can coexist with somebody I disagree with. I disagree with people on multitude of things. I think with Gary Black, he's a classic investor. He's a fund guy, and is looking at it from his own prism, which is the investment manager prism, which is basically you have to be aware of the stock price. You cannot go full in balls deep and just go, oh, the technology. That's not how he's wired. He's never going to be that, and that's fine for him. And he represents, in my opinion, how institutional investors think about Tesla. And the warning flags that they're throwing out, in my opinion, are healthy because they're basically giving Tesla a kind of a manual on how to be more friendly to institutional investors down the road, which I think is important. He's talking about buybacks, talking about key man risk elimination, et cetera, things that institutional investors are really focused on beyond just the technology. And I think that's healthy. So I have no issue with him. Especially
well, all right.
that.
So let me.
He's a Tesla bull at the end of the day. I mean, he's been one of the main Tesla bulls for a while.
So I think he pretends to, not just give you my take. I think he pretends to be a Tesla bull, and I'll give you a specific concern that I have.
Doesn't he have like a big chunk of his money in Tesla?
Does he?
Well,
How much do you think he has?
I don't know.
Well,
he says it's his biggest position in
his fund. His fund FFND, as I checked it today, assets under management's under 8 million, and Tesla's I think 10% of his fund.
Okay, still a big investment. 10% is still a big investment for you.
Yeah, I know people who have a lot more, and they're individuals.
Yeah, I'm not talking about the ultimate numbers. I'm saying if 10% of your AUM and your professional.
Well, that's just the way the fund was designed. That's how this fund was pitched. But here's the point: there are people who say, oh, he
By the
reflects
way, it
how.
might be his biggest position with 10%.
Hang on. There are people who say, oh, he reflects how Wall Street people think about stocks and companies. And
Yes.
I would say maybe he reflects how Wall Street people think about how bad Wall Street people think about their customers is how do I extract as much money from the people rather than how do I identify the best investment. And I'll give you a particular example of that he's starting up a new investment that he's doing a Zoom tomorrow. If you go to the Future Fund Twitter account, you can see they're promoting this new investment where you can invest in his fund management company that is going to manage his funds. And I would encourage you to go on there, sign up, download the document, read it, go to the Zoom if you have time tomorrow. It's tomorrow at like 11 Central, maybe. If I don't know if you have time for that, I'm not going to participate in the Zoom. I don't think I'd be welcome because I don't think Gary's very fond of me. But read through the document, and in particular for those who are watching, read pages 145 and 146, and also 85 and 99.
Or he's the lawyer coming out of you.
Well, no. Like a really good example is I would say ask this question: what is this line about $1.6 million in convertible debt? Who holds the debt? What are the terms of the debt? What are the terms of the conversion? There's some issues in that document. Again, pages 145 and 146 in particular, and also page 99 are some pages that I think are worth looking at for people. And I would just suggest to you that you take a look at that and ask yourself, is a guy who would offer this investment someone that I would trust? And I think if you read through that document, you would say, this concerns me. So
I'm not familiar with that specific investment, so I
you go to invest.thefuturefund.com. Invest.thefuturefund.com. Sign up, download the memorandum, I think it's called, read through it. Again, pages 145 and 146 are like the real scary moments. Anyway, so
is there going to be a Reg D fund?
I thought it was Reg C, but don't hold me to that.
Okay.
But
never mind. I'll check it out.
It's not a fund. It's an investment. You're investing in the company that manages the fund.
Oh, okay, got it.
And then he's going to add other funds, grow other funds, and supposedly grow to assets under management of $1 billion in 5 years, which is an interesting. There's a bunch of other interesting. I could dive deep on it, but I have a video on my a supporter only video where I go really dive deep on this document.
Well, a billion of AUM is still considered a boutique in Wall Street.
Right, but he's at 8 million now.
Yeah,
his fund's at 8 million. Going to $1 billion in 5 years is pretty impressive. So we'll see. But you have to look at the document. Maybe I think he said he has $40 million assets under management. I think that's including private clients. Are they included in this investment company? I don't know. So anyway, that's my thoughts. So I think you had some concerns with Ross Gerber.
No, I just obviously with him going ham on Palantir. Yeah, I didn't like that because I think a lot of FUD about Palantir, but we're not here to talk about Palantir. So that's the first time that I had any sort of like negativity towards him, because I was like, why is this guy saying that this is a CIA level of data gathering company, which clearly like just read what they do and how they work. Never mind.
Yeah.
So that's like the first red flag for me. It's like, how does he not know? Come on, like you should know. There's definitely criticisms, plenty about Palantir. For example, more transparency about what you do, your product.
Yeah.
Margins are shit. You're missing earnings. And I mean, there's a lot to talk about Palantir. Like there's client concentration. I can name 20 things I can say about Palantir. That's a huge problem for me as an investor that concern me. They're far from a perfect company. But to say that they're spying after people and collecting the data for the CIA, and it's like, what? So that kind of, well,
that would seem to be a good investment. That would make it a good investment, wouldn't it?
A private CIA. Well, we have a private NASA already, like with SpaceX. So yeah, but unfortunately, that's not what they do. They're not a private CIA company, at least not that I'm aware of. But in any case, look, I think if you talk about people who are more concerned about the share price than the technology, it seems to be he's on that side more recently with his latest tweets. He wants to be on the board of Tesla. He wants to re-educate Elon on how to run his own company. To me, it's a little bit strange. It's like saying, look, we are all sitting on the couch watching the team play the game, right? And it's like me saying, "Well, coach, call me. I want to explain to you what you should." Motherfucker, you're sitting on the couch, bro.
Yeah, yeah.
None of us get to tell Elon how to run his own company. I mean, we can talk about it in the barbershop, but we can't say, "Hey, I can do it better than you."
Right.
Hire me as the assistant. I mean, come on,
Right.
man.
The one thing I'll say about Ross is he has in his firm, Gerber Kawasaki, he had at last report that I saw, he had $2 billion assets under management. And I've talked to him about his business, about what he does for his clients as a wealth management company. And I think he does a really good job for his clients. I think his public persona, his presentation, the way he talks about Elon, I don't like that side of him. But contrary to what I think of Gary, I think that Ross is really good on that side. And I just, I've had the conversation. I understand what he's doing. And having $2 billion assets under management and having a big firm with a lot of employees doing it, he's got to be doing something right.
Yeah, for sure.
So you had to be out in a couple minutes.
Yeah, but again, here's the whole point. I can coexist with people I wholeheartedly disagree with. And that's why I would be happy to get Ross on my show and talk to him for an hour. I mean, I don't have, the only guy I would never want to have a conversation with is probably Gordon Johnson. But with barring Gordon Johnson, who's like went to the dark side, he's like literally he became this.
Right.
That's so except him, anybody's like I can coexist with people I disagree with. Even Ross Gerber doesn't seem like a jerk to me. He seems just he's a very colorful personality, very interesting guy.
I've disagreed with Ross actively a number of times, and he doesn't block me. Every time I disagree with Gary publicly about something, he blocks me, and then a month later he unblocks me. And now this time I think it's permanent, and I can assure you it's permanent on my side too. He's crossed some lines that I think are way beyond. I think people are underestimating. This is an opinion. I think he's very, very manipulative, and he's playing games that he shouldn't be playing. But that's an opinion. So, Tom, I want to thank you for coming on. For the audience, please check out Tom's channel. I'll put a link to it in the description below. I'm sure Tom has merch. I've got merch. Check out my t-shirts at elonbits.com.
I don't have merch.
Oh, you got to get merch.
I don't have merch. I have a platform. I don't know if you heard. I'll give you access. It's called Stock MVP.
Okay.
I built a whole platform on how to research stocks. You probably won't use it because you have one stock in your portfolio.
Right. Well, send me a link. Send me a link, and I'll put that in the video description.
I'll send you a link. I actually want to use this last few seconds to invite you to come on my channel.
I'd love that.
I can grill you and be the host and ask all the questions, because there's a million questions I want to ask you about your cabin, about your Model X, about FSD. So we haven't covered like half the stuff I really want to talk about.
Let's do it. Okay. Yeah. All right. Thank you very much for coming on. Everybody else, please check out the video, my other videos. Check out Tom's channel and his Stock MVP. Check out my merch. Support me as a YouTube channel member, on Locals, or as a Patreon supporter. Please like this video, share, and subscribe. And thank you all so much for watching.